Usually when we talk about a medical outbreak, there's like a clear physical culprit. It's
Yeah.
a straightforward mystery.
Right. People get sick, you test the food or the water.
Exactly. You find the bacteria, you point to it and say, there it is. That's the poison. But then you look at an event like the summer of 1999 in Belgium.
Oh, the Coca-Cola incident?
Yeah. 9 kids at a school come down with severe headaches, palpitations, and vomiting right after lunch. And the only common denominator was that they all drank Coca-Cola.
Wow.
Within days, pale, limp kids are being rushed to hospitals across the entire country. The panic even jumps the border into France. I mean, it becomes one of the worst financial blows in Coca-Cola's history. Millions of bottles recalled.
Hundreds of millions of dollars lost right
Totally.
here.
So we're looking at what appears to be a massive, terrifying, nationwide poisoning.
It was the absolute definition of a health crisis. The government was in an uproar. The public was terrified. Well, until the toxicologists finally released their report a few weeks later.
And they found absolutely nothing. I mean, they tested the cans. No pesticides, no pathogens, no heavy metals.
Everything at all.
Right. They tested the blood and urine of the kids. Zilch. The kids were genuinely, physically sick-like. They were truly vomiting and hyperventilating. But the cause wasn't in the can. It was in their minds. Okay, let's unpack this. Because what happened there was a mass psychogenic illness.
Right. It's a psychological phenomenon called the nocebo effect.
Yeah. We all know the placebo effect, where believing a fake pill will cure you actually makes your body feel better. The nocebo effect is like the dark mirror to that. If you deeply believe something will make you sick, your body will actually manifest the illness.
And what's fascinating here is that this psychological phenomenon is the perfect lens for the mission of our deep dive today.
It really is.
We are exploring a radical idea presented in Rutger Bregman's book, Humankind. We're relying entirely on the research, the archaeology, and the historical accounts he gathered to look at human nature itself. Specifically, we're testing what is known as the Veneer Theory.
The Veneer Theory. It's this pervasive, almost invisible idea that civilization is just a razor-thin crust covering our innate, seething savagery.
Yes, that underneath our polite smiles, we are just selfish beasts waiting to tear each other apart.
Exactly. And here's my analogy for you, the listener, as we dive into this. Our cynical view of humanity acts as a cultural nocebo. If we collectively believe that humans are fundamentally terrible, we design our entire world, our schools, our workplaces, our justice systems to manage terrible people. We quite literally make our society sick with our own cynicism.
It's so true. And this feeling of cynicism, it isn't just a modern affliction. It is the culmination of a grand historical debate.
Oh, absolutely.
On one side, you have the 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes argued that early human life was a war of all against all. He believed we were driven purely by fear and selfishness, and that we required a strong, terrifying leader, a leviathan, to tame our savage instincts.
But then in the other corner, you have the 18th century philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued the exact opposite.
Right. Rousseau believed humans were innately good and compassionate, and that it was the invention of civilization and private property that actually corrupted us.
For centuries, this was just a philosophical boxing match.
Yeah.
But today, using modern science, we can finally answer who was right.
So let's start testing that Veneer theory with the ultimate pressure cooker, a global crisis.
Yeah, because if Hobbes was right, a massive catastrophe should strip away that civilized crust instantly.
Exactly. Let's look at the eve of World War II. You had leaders like Winston Churchill and Adolf Hitler, both of whom had read Gustave Le Bon's influential work on crowd psychology.
Oh, they totally bought into it. They expected that if you bombed a city from the air, the population would just instantly descend into madness.
Right. Churchill predicted millions of Londoners would flee, traffic would cease, and the city would fall into this animalistic pandemonium. They called it Planet B.
So Hitler unleashed the Blitz. Over 9 months, more than 80,000 bombs were dropped on London alone. 1 million buildings were damaged. It was the ultimate horrifying test of the Veneer theory.
And what actually happened?
Well, look at the observations of Dr. John McCurdy. He was a psychiatrist who drove through a devastated London neighborhood right after a massive air raid. He didn't find pandemonium.
Oh.
He found little boys playing on the pavements, shoppers haggling over prices, and a policeman directing traffic in absolute boredom. People were literally sipping tea while their windows rattled from the explosions.
It's incredible. And not only were the psychiatric wards empty, but public mental health actually improved during the Blitz. Suicides dropped.
It was this bizarre collective serenity. And it wasn't an isolated incident either. When the Allied forces bombed Germany, intending to break the German morale based on that exact same top-down Veneer theory, they expected the population to crack.
Right. They thought the Germans would turn on their leaders.
Instead, it strengthened German resilience. I mean, under constant bombardment, German tank production multiplied by a factor of 9.
The bombings created a callus, not a crack.
But, I mean, surely the London Blitz is just proof of the famous British stiff upper lip, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this actually human nature or just a cultural quirk?
Well, the German data proves it's not just a British thing. But we saw the exact same phenomenon much more recently during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans.
Oh, the media coverage of that was insane.
It was filled with horrific reports of roving gangs, snipers shooting at rescue helicopters, and murders in the Superdome. It sounded exactly like that war of all against all.
But later research by the Disaster Research Center showed that almost all of that was completely false, right?
Exactly. What sounded like sniper fire was literally just a popping relief valve on a gas tank. Instead of anarchy, there was widespread pro-social behavior.
Like those groups, they dubbed the Robin Hood looters. Friends who banded together to brave the floodwaters, find food and medicine, and hand it out to the stranded.
The overwhelming majority of emergent activity was cooperative.
So people really did just look out for each other.
Yes. Which brings us to the real danger in these situations. What author Rebecca Solnit calls elite panic.
Elite panic.
Powerful people project their own self-interest and cynicism onto the masses. Because authorities fundamentally believed the Veneer Theory, they made disastrous top-down decisions. During Katrina, the government sent 72,000 armed troops into New Orleans with orders to shoot and kill.
Instead of just sending rescue workers with food and boats.
Elite panic is what turns a natural disaster into a human tragedy.
It's so tragic. But, it's easy to dismiss adults cooperating.
Yeah.
We've all been conditioned by decades of society to follow the rules, to share, to be polite. The real acid test would be people who haven't had that social conditioning pounded into them yet, like kids.
Right.
What happens if you take a group of children and leave them entirely to their own devices?
You're talking about the ultimate laboratory for human nature, and in our cultural imagination, that laboratory is perfectly captured by William Golding's 1951 novel, Lord of the Flies.
Oh, man. Golding's fictional story of British schoolboys crash landing on a deserted island. Within weeks, they abandon their democratic rules, paint their faces, and descend into murder.
And that book won a Nobel Prize. It convinced generations of readers that kids, stripped of adult supervision, would inevitably turn into bloodthirsty monsters.
But it's entirely made up. When we look at reality, a true Lord of the Flies scenario actually happened. In 1965, 6 boys from Tongasión, Stephen, Colo, David, Luke, and Minot were bored at their strict boarding school.
They decided to, quote-unquote, borrow a fisherman's boat for an adventure.
Right. And a storm hit, the sail tore, the rudder broke, and they drifted in the open ocean for 8 days without food or water until they washed up on a rugged rock of an island called Ada.
Yeah.
They were marooned there, completely alone, for 15 months.
So no adults, no rules, just hungry teenagers trying to survive. What did they do? If Golding was right, they should have turned on each other.
But they didn't. They set up a functional commune. They created a strict roster for garden, kitchen, and guard duty.
They even kept a signal fire burning continuously for over a year.
Yeah, and when they argued, which teenagers inevitably do, they didn't resort to violence. They imposed timeouts. The 2 squabblers would go to opposite ends of the island to cool off, then come back and apologize.
And when one boy, Stephen, fell off a cliff and broke his leg, they didn't leave him for dead. They carefully set his leg with sticks and leaves and did his chores while he healed.
When an Australian sea captain named Peter Warner finally rescued them, they were in peak physical condition. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because listening to that organic, unscripted reality on Ada, it makes me think about modern reality TV. Shows like Survivor or MTV's The Real World.
Oh, absolutely.
Pop culture acts like a rigged experiment today. The producers literally have to ply people with booze, deprive them of sleep, withhold food, and manufacture artificial drama through deceptive editing just to get that Hobbesian savagery they want for the cameras.
It's a brilliant analogy. Reality TV is a manufactured environment designed to confirm our worst biases, and it connects directly to our media consumption as a whole.
How so?
Psychologists note that we suffer from an intense availability bias. Because the news only reports the exceptional, the sensational, and the violent, we start to assume that violence is the norm. We don't see headlines about the millions of people who didn't rob a bank today.
Right, or the neighbors who helped each other carry groceries.
Exactly. This skewed media diet actively makes us more cynical. It acts as that cultural nocebo you mentioned earlier.
So, if human children naturally cooperate when left alone, and adults look out for each other in a crisis, it forces us to completely rethink our evolutionary history. How did our species, Homo sapiens, conquer the globe? Because the assumption has always been that we survived because we were the meanest, most aggressive apes on the block.
To understand this, we have to look at how we compare to other primates. Researchers have tested human toddlers against chimpanzees and orangutans on raw intelligence, spatial awareness, calculation, causality. The human toddlers score basically the exact same as the apes.
Really? The exact same.
Yes, but there is one specific test where human toddlers absolutely crush them. Social learning. The ability to learn from others, to copy, to bond, and to share goals.
So they're ultra-social learning machines. We are the only species in the animal kingdom that blushes, which is an involuntary social signal showing we care what others think about us.
And we're the only primates with the whites of our eyes visible.
Right. Every other primate hides their gaze, almost like a poker player wearing sunglasses so rivals can't see what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Our visible eye whites allow others to track exactly what we're focusing on. It builds immediate trust.
Which brings us to the fascinating biological concept of domestication. In the 1950s, a Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev and his student Lyudmila Trut started a secret experiment in Siberia with silver foxes. They selected foxes for breeding based on one single trait: friendliness.
If a fox approached the cage without biting, it was bred. They did not select for physical appearance at all.
Exactly.
But the physical appearance changed anyway, right?
Right. Dramatically. Within just a few generations, they developed floppy ears, curly tails, spotted coats, and baby faces. They started barking like dogs and wagging their tails.
That's wild. Selecting only for friendliness accidentally triggered physical domestication.
And the why behind this is fascinating. Breeding for friendliness essentially means selecting for lower adrenaline levels. Adrenaline shares a biochemical pathway with melanin, and altering those pathways impacts neural crest cells in embryos. Those cells dictate everything from cartilage development to pigmentation.
Hence the floppy ears and spotted coats.
Yes. And amazingly, later tests showed these friendly foxes were actually smarter and better at problem solving than the aggressive ones.
So friendliness literally reshapes the biology of a species.
The scientific consensus now is that humans underwent this exact same process. We domesticated ourselves. Over the last 50,000 years, as the friendliest humans were most welcomed into groups, our physical appearance changed.
Our skulls got softer and rounder.
Our heavy brow ridges shrank, our faces became more childlike, and interestingly, our brains actually shrank by about 10%. We became what biologists playfully call Homo puppy.
Wait, hold on. If we are basically just golden retrievers in human suits, the math doesn't add up for me.
Yeah.
How did we outlive the Neanderthals? Weren't they wiped out because we were smarter and much more aggressive?
That's the old assumption, but the archaeological record doesn't support it. Neanderthals actually had larger brains than we do today. They were incredibly tough and brilliant. But here is the mechanism that gave us the edge. Neanderthals were like a super fast standalone computer.
Okay.
They had massive individual processing power. Homo puppy, on the other hand, was like an old-fashioned PC equipped with Wi-Fi.
Oh, I see.
If a Neanderthal invented a new tool, that knowledge likely died with their isolated family group. If a Homo sapiens invented it, they uploaded it to the network through gossip, trade, and migration. We might have been slower individually, but we were hyper-connected.
Our sociability was our cloud storage. Okay, so what does this all mean? If we are Homo puppy, biologically wired to be social, friendly, and cooperative, how do we explain the endless wars, the inequality, the horrific violence that fills our history books?
To answer that, we have to look at how reluctant humans actually are to kill. During World War II, Colonel S.L.A. Marshall made a startling discovery after the Battle of Macon Island. He found that in a do-or-die combat situation, only 15 to 25% of American soldiers actually fired their weapons at the enemy.
The vast majority simply couldn't bring themselves to pull the trigger on another human being.
And it wasn't just World War II. After the American Civil War Battle of Gettysburg, they recovered tens of thousands of muskets from the battlefield. 90% of them were fully loaded.
Thousands were double or triple loaded. The soldiers were using the complicated loading process as a physical excuse not to shoot. They'd just keep packing powder and lead into the barrel rather than fire it at someone.
We have a profound innate resistance to killing. which completely debunks the popular killer ape theory, championed by people like Steven Pinker, who argued that prehistoric humans were constantly slaughtering each other.
When anthropologists actually look at the data without confirmation bias, they find that prehistoric nomadic hunter-gatherers were remarkably peaceful and egalitarian. They only worked 20 to 30 hours a week.
If a leader got too arrogant, the group actively used humor and shame to bring them down and maintain equality. And in all the cave paintings from that era, there is no archaeological evidence of war.
So prehistoric times weren't that war of all against all Hobbes warned us about. When did it all go wrong then? Because clearly we have a lot of war now.
It went wrong about 15,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. The climate warmed up, and humans stumbled into lush floodplains where food was suddenly plentiful.
So we stopped moving. We settled down.
We settled down. And because we stayed put and had an abundance of food, the population exploded. But eventually, the easy food ran out. To feed this massive new population, we had to invent agriculture. We claimed land. As Rousseau presciently said, the moment someone drew a line in the dirt and said, "This is mine," the trouble started.
It was a trap. My analogy for this is we wandered into a lush floodplain for an easy meal, but population exploded. Suddenly, we were stuck working 80-hour weeks in backbreaking fields, and we couldn't go back to being nomads because there were simply too many mouths to feed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the shift to agriculture changed everything. Living in dense settlements near our newly domesticated animals brought us devastating infectious diseases. Measles from cows, the flu from pigs and ducks.
And crucially, because we now had private property and stockpiles of grain, we had something to fight over.
This is when the first military fortifications appear in the archaeological record. Civilization didn't save us from violence, it invented it. Rulers, kings, and generals, leviathans, emerged to protect the stockpiles. They used war and statehood to cement their own power.
It flips our historical understanding totally upside down. But wait, what about societies that just destroy themselves through sheer short-sighted greed and environmental destruction? I have to ask about Easter Island. It's the ultimate cautionary tale of human selfishness.
The Jared Diamond story.
Exactly. The popular myth is that the Easter Islanders were so obsessed with building those giant moai statues that they greedily cut down every single tree on the island to roll the stones. They ruined their own soil, starved, and descended into a brutal civil war and cannibalism by 1680.
That is the widely accepted story. But an environmental biologist named Jan Boersema decided to look at the original logbook of the very first European to arrive there, the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen in 1722. Boersema expected to read about a barren hellscape.
But he didn't.
Instead, Roggeveen described an earthly paradise. The inhabitants were healthy, friendly, and well-fed. The soil was fertile. There was absolutely no mention of war, destroyed statues, or cannibalism.
And the modern forensic evidence completely backs up that original logbook. The thousands of obsidian arrowheads they found scattered around, called mata'a, which were supposedly used in this massive bloody civil war. Microscopic analysis showed they were completely dull.
They weren't weapons at all.
They were just everyday paring knives used for peeling bananas and root vegetables. There was no mass warfare, and the population wasn't reduced from some unsustainable 15,000 down to a starving few. Advanced carbon dating shows they arrived much later, around 1100 AD, and the population naturally maxed out around a highly sustainable 2,200 people.
And those statues weren't monuments to tyrannical egos that destroyed the environment. They were massive communal rituals designed to bring the people together and share resources.
If the evidence for peace and cooperation was in the original logbook all along, why did so many brilliant scientists eagerly buy into the cannibalism and ecocide story?
This raises an important question about how history is written. What actually happened to Easter Island is that later on, in the 1860s, Peruvian slave ships raided the island, taking a third of the population. Then, European diseases like smallpox decimated the rest.
Wow.
When 19th and 20th century historians arrived and found a broken, traumatized society, they suffered from a massive confirmation bias rooted in the Veneer Theory. Instead of acknowledging the violence of the colonizers, they blamed the natives.
They assumed the islanders must have greedily destroyed themselves.
We used Easter Island as a mirror for our own modern anxieties about climate change and resource depletion, rather than looking objectively at the facts of their cooperative society.
Okay, we have covered so much ground today. Let's synthesize this journey. We started with the incredible resilience and calmness of Londoners drinking tea during the Blitz. We saw the cooperative, beautiful society built by the maroon teenage boys on Ada. We explored the evolutionary friendliness of Homo puppy, the innate reluctance of soldiers to pull the trigger, and finally, the real, peaceful story of Easter Island.
The evidence from across history, biology, and anthropology is overwhelming. Human nature is fundamentally decent. We are built for connection, for social learning, and for cooperation.
And why should you, the listener, care?
Because believing in the goodness of humanity isn't some naive, romantic dream. Based on the hard data, it is the new realism. The way you view your neighbors, your colleagues, and the news fundamentally alters the world you help create. If you expect people to be selfish, you design rigid systems that force them to be selfish. But if you expect people to be good, you allow them to be good.
Which leaves you with one final thought to mull over today. If humans are naturally wired for egalitarianism, for play, and for shared achievement, rather than top-down commanding hierarchies, what does that mean for how we structure our modern world?
It's a huge question.
Imagine a Monday morning where there are no middle managers tracking your keystrokes, no arbitrary corporate surveillance, and no punitive grading systems in our schools. Imagine an environment where the baseline assumption isn't that you're lazy and need to be forced to work, but that you naturally want to contribute to the group. Are we currently designing our institutions for selfish Homo economicus robots when we should be designing them for cooperative Homo puppy humans?
The scientific data says we are biologically built for that exact kind of trust. The only question is, are we brave enough to actually try it?
Exactly. How would your workplace change tomorrow if the management actually trusted its people? We need to stop drinking the cultural nocebo. We need to realize that the illness we feel in society isn't coming from the core of who we are. It's coming from a story we've been told, and it's time to start telling a better one.